Dr. Engku and Dr. Khairia is already live on YouTube.
Okay. Okay. I think we can begin now, yeah? Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullah and good morning.
Waalaikumsalam.
Welcome to the 8th webinar series organized by SAPAT Research Unit. Let's begin with Umul Kitab Al-Fatiha. Okay, we are very fortunate today to have with us the coordinator of SAPAT Research Unit to share her knowledge on vocabulary teaching, which is her area of expertise. I believe many of you know her, if not all. But for those who are not familiar, especially new ones, let me brief a little bit about her. Datin Dr. Engku joined IIUM in 1991. She first came to IIUM to look for a part-time job, but ended up being a lecturer here for the past 30 years. You know, she has been in service for 30 years, alhamdulillah. Her academic background. She got her first degree in English language and literature from University of North Texas, United States of America. Her master's in applied linguistics from University of Wales, College of Cardiff, United Kingdom, and her PhD in literature in the second language classroom from the same university. Her areas of interest, research interest, include reading, problem-based learning, and vocabulary for second language acquisition. She has shared her knowledge in various publications and presented in many conferences, including in Greece, Dubai, Japan, Australia. And she has also been invited, she had also been invited to be a keynote speaker in the first conference of the Linguistics Association of Pakistan in 2015. Yeah? And for those who know her, and for those who have been here long, you know that Datin Dr. Engku Haliza Engku Ibrahim has held various positions in SAPAT, including being the coordinator of Portland, deputy head of department, Deputy Dean of Academic Affairs, Dean of SAPAT, and currently she is the coordinator of research. On what is the most challenging task assigned to her? She said that being the chairperson of the first International Language Conference organized by SAPAT in 2008. Without further ado, let's welcome Associate Professor Datin Dr. Engku Haliza Engku Ibrahim to talk on vocabulary teaching, to teach or not to teach. Tafadhal. Welcome, Dr. Engku.
Thank you very much, Assistant Professor Dr. Khairia. Let me start by trying to share my screen. Yeah? Bismillah. Okay, can you see my screen, Dr. Khairia?
Yes, we can see, Dr. Engku.
All right, okay. Dr. Khairia muted, yeah. Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and very good morning to everyone. Thank you for taking time to be with us today in our sharing session today. I don't claim to be an expert in the area, in this area. However, this is an area that is close to my heart, and throughout my presentation, I think you will know why this is so. This topic was purposely worded as such because in traditional classrooms, grammar was always prioritized. Yeah? It was always taught first, and it was always assumption that learners would acquire vocabulary as they go along. Yeah? But today, somehow, with the evolution in language teaching and the pedagogical implications, people have realized that vocabulary is very important. Yeah, as Wilkins put it, yeah, without grammar, very little can be conveyed. Yeah? However, without vocabulary, nothing can be conveyed. So we do understand that vocabulary is important, especially for our language learners. Yeah, we understand that vocabulary is needed because it's a high predictor for reading. And we understand that students are behind if they lack vocabulary knowledge. And the alarming thing that that has been shown in research is that they will remain behind. Yeah, so thus we know that vocabulary knowledge is very important for academic success. My presentation will proceed in such a manner that I will look at these issues, what we call issues in vocabulary acquisition. I have purposely put these questions as such because throughout my presentation, I will attempt to answer all these questions, yeah, one by one. The first question that I think we as teachers would like to know is, which vocabulary should we focus on? Because I think we understand that in a language, there's a lot of vocabulary. Yeah? So which ones do we focus on? And then the next question as teachers that we ask is, should we teach all vocabulary in class? When you ask the question, which vocabulary to focus on, you also, the question that also comes to mind is, how much vocabulary is enough? Yeah, what does enough mean? So how do we know a learner's vocabulary size? Is there such a way of measuring? And of course, with vocabulary, we know strategies are important. Today, we realize that strategies are important. Yeah. So for us, particularly as language teachers, would like to know what are the pedagogical implications. The first question, how much vocabulary is enough? In order for us to answer that question, we've got to start with a baseline. Yeah, enough vocabulary. So what is the size of a native, vocabulary size of a native speaker? I'm a native speaker of Bahasa Melayu. Yeah, of Malay. But do I know my vocabulary size? No, I don't. Yes, but we need to have that baseline knowledge in order to know what a second language learner or a foreign language learner needs to have in their repertoire. Yeah. So how do we measure their vocabulary size? And how much vocabulary is needed for comprehension to occur? Lucky for us, there's a lot of research being carried out today. Yeah? For starters, we know that college-educated native English speakers' vocabulary size range from around 13,200 to 20,700. Yeah, this has been shown by Nation and Reed. This is receptive vocabulary. Yeah? Of course, we know that receptive vocabulary size is bigger compared to productive vocabulary size. And the recommended size for a second language learner or a foreign language learner, for them to be able to handle authentic text, yeah, and the emphasis here is on authentic text, should be around 8,000 to 9,000 word families. Yeah, so that's still quite a big number. Yeah, but when we compare it to 13,000 is a lot smaller. I'm going to talk more about this a bit later. And also, we have to understand that for comprehension to occur when a reader reads something, when a learner reads a text, students should be able to comprehend at least 95% of what they receive as input. Input equates something that they read, something that they hear, but Nation says 98% is preferable. But how do all these percentages translate into reality, into what students see in the text? What I have here is an example of the text highlighted in blue here, or rather green here, is an example of a text that has 40 words of how a learner who has 80% comprehension sees it. So what we can see is that there are quite a few gaps here. Suffice to say, the learner would have a gist of understanding. They would understand the gist, but they will probably not understand everything. The text highlighted in yellow here shows a text that is read by a learner who has 95% understanding. This is a text of 40 words. So there's only 5% unknown words. You can see there's very few gaps of information here. So it is a bit, it is not such a big effort for the learner to understand. Okay, having said that, what do results of research tell us? The reality of our learners. In 2013, we did a small research in IIUM. This was a research of learners who were at the highest level of intensive English course. Some of them have had 2 years of English with us, and they were on the brink of joining the respective faculties. When we ran the vocabulary size test on them, we discovered that an average size of most of the students were around about 2,000 words. And researchers have discovered that the average EFL learners' vocabulary size range from around 1,000 to 4,000 words. That's an approximate figure. And Staher 2008 has also carried out a study on high school leavers. He understands that learners need to reach the 2,000 word level, but he discovered that a lot of them did not achieve this level. So this is something very alarming. So what now? Knowing this information, how can we use this information such that we can help our learners speed up the language acquisition, so-called speed up the acquisition, if there's such a thing as speeding up one's language acquisition. Experts recommend that we focus on certain types of vocabulary. The first type of vocabulary is to focus on the high frequency words. This is the first 3,000 words in the corpus. And the next thing for us to do is to move on to specialized and technical vocabulary. I'm going to talk more about this a bit later as we progress throughout the presentation, inshallah. So what are high frequency words? They're just words that appear most commonly in everyday usage and general text. And the emphasis here is on general text. We're not even talking about technical text yet. So the highest frequency words in English language, are words like in, for, the. These words are sometimes very difficult to teach. Unlike content words, there are also content words that are very high frequency. And content words like nouns are a lot easier to teach because we can use photos, or we can use pictures for illustrations. Low frequency words, on the other hand, are words that make up a very small portion of academic text, approximately only 5% of academic text. We were talking about the vocabulary to focus on, and there were two types of vocabulary that we were, two groups of vocabulary that we were talking about. One is the high frequency words, and the other is the technical words. The high frequency words An example of a corpus that contain high frequency words is the general service list. The general service list. This is a list compiled by Michael West in 1953, a long time ago. This was a pre-computer era, and he based this corpus, his list on 2.5 million corpus. Yeah, there are a lot of criticisms today because 2.5 million corpus is considered small in this computer era. Yeah, and there are researchers like Brown, Culligan, and Phillips who have used a bigger corpus of 273 million billion. Pardon, I beg your pardon, of 273 million of a 2 billion corpus. Yeah, and this corpus came from written work as well as spoken data. This is the list of high frequency words, yeah, in English. And the technical words or the specialized vocabulary, there's also a list drawn up by various people, by various researchers. One such researcher is Coxhead. She actually put together a list of 570 head words. This is the academic words. Yeah, and then there was also a group of researchers who attempted to update her word list, because we must understand that language is fluid. Yeah, and it's constantly changing, and words that were considered high frequency before are no longer high frequency now, and vice versa. And to move on, the next question that we like to look at: how do we know a learner's vocabulary size? Is there such a way to measure? Fortunately, today, due to research and due to the internet, there are many available online. Yeah. Some examples are Nation's Vocabulary Size Test, Smith and Clapham Vocabulary Levels Test, and Murray's Vocabulary Test. I caution you, however, to not use this test in the classroom to measure vocabulary acquisition. It is helpful to use this test for you to have a rough idea of how much vocabulary your learners have, yeah, as a baseline. It is definitely helpful for you as an educator or as a language teacher to know what you know or what you do not know. I was very, when I first discovered this, I was really excited, and I, straight away took the test because I really wanted to gauge how much vocabulary I knew. Okay, so yeah, so these are some of the tests, and they're all available online, and they're really quick. However, again, remember, it can be quite demotivating for you to use this on your learners. And this test is not sensitive enough for you to measure student progress. Let's say if you measure the students' vocabulary size at the beginning of a semester and you want to see their progress at the end of the semester, it's not sensitive enough to be able to do that in a very short time span. So use this sparingly, yeah. But for advanced learners, because if they'd like to know how much they know or how much they do not know, they can do this on their own, but do not use this in the classroom. Okay, so the question that that is at the top of all our heads or minds is: should teachers teach all the vocabulary in class? Would that even be possible? So what should we do then? Yeah. When I saw this, I was thinking like, for us to want to teach all words in the classroom, or to attempt to teach all words in the classroom, would make us super teachers, and that's really not possible with all the things that we've got to deal with in the language classroom. Yeah. We're all familiar with this phrase: give a child a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach him how to fish and you feed him for life. Yeah. What I would strongly recommend is for us to teach word learning strategies. It is definitely more beneficial than merely teaching words. Of course, I'm not saying that we shouldn't teach words. We should highlight words. I will touch about how we should create opportunities for learning in the classroom. Yeah, but teaching word learning strategies should be prioritized in the classroom. Yeah, and research has shown that learners who use a lot of strategies are more successful in the language learning journey. I'd like to take you on, to share with you, or rather, my personal journey in my language acquisition. I, for one, do not feel that it was a very easy journey. It was full of trials and tribulation. But my life started, or my exposure to the English language started very early when I was thrown in the deep end. I was sent to an English medium primary school. Then my father was, my late father was a government servant, so he got transferred to Kuching, Sarawak, and the medium of communication, the medium of instruction in schools in Kuching then was English. So I was thrown in the deep end. We did speak English at home, but somehow I suppose as a child I got by. But I've always struggled with reading comprehension passages. I knew that I had a problem with vocabulary. I sometimes didn't understand texts that I read, especially for my English. Yeah? And then, to make things worse, when I got to Form 1, my father suddenly realized that, oh, it's going to be quite confusing for her if she were to continue in the English medium curriculum, because we would probably sometime in our lives get transferred back to West Malaysia. So he exported me back to West Malaysia into a Malay medium boarding school. Yeah, so again, I struggled. I really struggled in my secondary school. My Bahasa Melayu was not at its best, but my English wasn't really great either. Yeah, but the bonus was that I had an excellent English teacher. She really helped with my receptive vocabulary, I should say that. There were a lot of graded readers. We had to read graded readers every week. And the one particular activity that I really didn't like then was that she would make us do free writing at the beginning of every or most English classes. You know, what she would do is that she would say, okay, just write about, we had this special free writing exercise book, and she would say, just write about anything that comes to mind. Sometimes she'll take us out she'll take us outside and say, and put us in front of a flower and say, write about this flower. Or she'll say, look up to the sky and write about what you see. You know, and this would go on and on and on throughout the year, because I only had her for a year. Yeah. And then after that, to make things worse, I think I was thrown to Texas, USA, and you know how people in Texas are. They speak with a very strong accent. Yeah, I really struggled in the US. I had a lot of passive knowledge of the English language. I was not confident speaking or using the English language. I think I could write like most of our learners in Malaysia, but I could not use the language confidently in communication, in my verbal communication. Yeah. So I realized this, and one of the things that I did was to work as a server. I got a job as a server in a university cafeteria. It's actually legal to work in the US, yeah, as on campus. And one time, one of the supervisors, who was a Spanish, but a Spanish who lived in America for a long time. So he asked me, Uncle, when you return to your country, what are you going to do? So I said, I'm going to teach. So he asked me, what are you going to teach? So I said, I'm going to teach English. And then he looked at me for the longest time and he said, not like that, you're not. Yeah, not speaking like that, you're not. So that was really a slap in my face, you know, because I realized that I was not a proficient user of the English language. What else to teach the English language? So the reason for me sharing this personal journey is because I think it is important for us as language educators to share with our learners our struggles, our personal struggles. I think all of us have our own personal struggles, and just to make our learners understand that language acquisition is a journey. I'm going to come back to that a bit later. Some vocabulary learning strategies that we could possibly share in our classroom, and these strategies are endless. Yeah, today I have purposely not put all the apps that we have available on our phones and our computers, but some of the strategies that that I think are particularly useful for adult learners would be something like metacognitive strategies. That would be very useful. Yeah, because we're dealing with adult learners, or maybe teen learners who are in their teens. We should encourage our learners to think about the language learning, yeah? To think about the process that they are going through. One of our favorite is to use contextual clues. Yeah, a lot of the reading comprehension passages and the questions are generated based on making learners use contextual clues. Sometimes we're baffled as to why our learners are not able to use these contextual clues. Well, surprise, surprise, if the learner's vocabulary size is small, they're not able to make use of contextual clues. We saw just now a learner with 80% comprehension of a text. There are a lot of gaps, yeah, a lot of gaps in their vocabulary knowledge. So how are they going to be able to use contextual clues? When I realized that I had very small vocabulary size, because I realized I had a small vocabulary size because I could not understand most texts. Yeah, this was in my secondary school. I used to draw up word lists. I attempted to memorize the dictionary. I don't know why. It's probably destined for me to be an English teacher, but I was not successful with all of these. Yeah, I realized that this did stay with me for very long. And there are many other strategies such as encoding, activation, just to name a few. But I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about dictionary strategies. I know today learners do not use a lot of dictionaries due to the existence of Mr. Google. It's a lot faster for us to just, I'm guilty of this myself, it's a lot faster for us to just type in the word and just to have a quick definition of the words. However, we were very fortunate some years ago for us to be able to, the English Language Division of SALPED, we adopted the Macmillan English Dictionary, and I particularly like this dictionary. I am not given a commission for saying this, but I particularly like this dictionary because there are red words, yeah, red words, and these red words are high frequency words, yeah, and these high frequency words are indicated by the stars. The 3 stars. The 3 stars, red words, are the highest frequency words. And then you have the red words, 2 stars. And then you have the red word, 1 star. Yeah. And as you can see here, the red word 3 stars are, there's a lot more explanation given there. Possibly, it would be helpful for teachers today to have at least one dictionary in the classroom for learners to have a feel of how to use dictionary. I know there are electronic dictionaries available today, but this dictionary skill is particularly helpful for us to use with our learners. Having said all of that, we've got to remember that as teachers, as educators, we've got to remember that every individual is unique. Understanding our learning style saves us from wasting our time studying hard rather than studying smart. I learned that the hard way. I drew up vocabulary lists. I could not remember them. Yeah, I looked up in dictionary trying to memorize some words. I quickly forgot them. Yeah? So each person has their own learning style, and the trick is figuring out which one is most suitable for us. I think with adult learners, it is important for us to highlight this to them, yes, so that they could try out what are the best ways for them to learn language. Everything is through trial and error. In the language classroom, it is useful for you to share your experience with your learners. What was your experience? What worked for you? What did not work for you? I knew that word list did not work for me. Yeah, I knew that looking at the dictionary for one time did not work for me. Sharing some of these would be helpful for your learners. I learn a lot through observation of other people trying to acquire the language. Observe your younger siblings, your nieces, your nephews, and your children. I'm very fortunate in the sense that I have 3 children who learn in 3 different ways. My first 2 girls were born in the UK. At that time, I was pursuing my master's and my PhD. By the time I had completed, my eldest daughter was 7 when we came home to Malaysia. My eldest daughter was 7. She had it easy. She was like a sponge. So she acquired the English language effortlessly, because she went to school. She had the opportunity of going to school in the UK. So she absorbed the language very easily. Yeah, talk about total immersion. Yeah? But her problem is when she came back to Malaysia, she had problems with her Bahasa Melayu. She was not doing very well with her Bahasa Melayu. We put her in Sekolah Kebangsaan, where the medium of instruction was Bahasa Melayu. But again, because she was a child, she picked up Bahasa Melayu very, very quickly. She didn't do too badly in her Bahasa Melayu test. So Alhamdulillah for that. But the case was different for my second daughter. When we came home, she was only 4. Sorry, she was only 3. Yeah? So she was not using the language much. So when she grew up and she started going to Sekolah Kebangsaan, we discovered that she needed help with the English language learning. Yeah? So what I tried to do was that, so I got her to read a lot. I would take her to bookstores and tell her to choose, Enid Blyton, and ask her, just choose one. What would you like to read about? I started her with short stories, and she really resisted this. She really did not enjoy reading. But I think after a while, she got used to it, and as she grew, she started to enjoy reading, and she would read for pleasure, and she would read books. She would buy books voluntarily. Yeah? So Alhamdulillah, today her English language is not too bad. I say she can get by with her English language. However, the experience with my third son is a bit different. He was born in Malaysia, born and raised in Malaysia throughout. We realized when he was in school that, again, he had problems with his English language. So I thought to myself, I can do this. I'm an English teacher. I have done this with my second daughter. I will make my son read. But surprise, surprise. He declared when he was very young, he said, I don't like to read, Mama. So no, the reading trick did not work for him. Yeah. He did not enjoy storybooks. Of course, there were times when I got him to read short stories, but he didn't really pick up that habit, and he still doesn't like to read up to today. He's quite grown up today, but he still doesn't enjoy reading. But there came to be a time where his English teachers highlighted to him that he needed to improve his English. And he would come home to me when he was in primary school, and he would say, Mama, today is English day. Usually it was Wednesdays, and then he said, we have to speak English the whole day. So that was our practice. Yeah. And then I discovered that because being the extrovert that he is, he likes to speak. Yeah. And he is really an audio person. Yeah. He enjoys listening to videos, and at that time he would pick up vocabulary from the then video games that he would play. So Alhamdulillah, we capitalized on that, yeah, and we would speak the language a lot at home to get him to practice. And Alhamdulillah, I think today he didn't do too badly with his language, English language. So what I'm trying to get at here is that, you know, even 3 children who come from the same set of parents would have different learning styles. Yes. So think about the learners that we have in the classroom. They all come from different backgrounds. Some come from very conservative backgrounds. Yeah? Back to theories and what researchers recommend. Yeah? It is recommended that direct and indirect teaching opportunities are provided in the classroom, yeah, for both receptive and productive learning. Of course, we have to realize that for receptive learning, receptive is when you see, learning is when you see a vocabulary, you recognize it. When you hear the word, you can understand it. Yeah? Productive learning is when you can use a word in writing, and you can use a word in the spoken form, in the spoken communication. And another thing is that repetition is important. Yeah? Researchers recommend that at least 10 repetitions for a learner to commit an unknown vocabulary to memory. Okay, and so now I understand as an adult why my attempt at the use of vocabulary lists and my attempt at using dictionaries to memorize words did not work. Yeah? What worked for me was total immersion. Total immersion. Yeah? I think my learning curve was the highest when I was doing my bachelor's degree, when I was in the US, when I had to work as a server in the cafeteria, because I had to learn to use the language. You know, there were phrases that I had to learn. There were pronunciation that I had to acquire. Yeah, I really had problems with that. As teachers, we have to create opportunities for direct teaching. Yeah? There have to be teacher explanations, sometimes as peer teaching. Yeah? There has to be direct learning. We have to encourage students to use their learning strategies that they feel would benefit them. Study from cards, dictionaries, from apps. You know, my daughter, when she was trying to learn Arabic, she used word lists, she used cards, she used apps. Yeah, today there's a lot of apps for language learning, and the apps will prompt you that you haven't visited me today, so you have to open the app and carry out the exercises. And then you have to create opportunities for incidental learning, guessing from context, in extensive reading, and in communication activities. Language has to be used in communication. That was how I think I learned the most in the US. I was very fortunate, alhamdulillah, because that was a language of the environment. I had no choice but to learn the language very, very quickly, to pick it up very, very quickly. Plan encounters. We have to plan encounters. That is why graded readers is very important, because the concept of graded readers is that they recycle the same amount of words, and that there should be vocabulary exercises. I don't know if any of you know, a lot of you know the Peter and Jane series. This is a series for language, a series that is used for very young learners to learn the English language. Yeah? This is Peter, this is Jane. Peter is here, Jane is here. Here is Jane, here is Peter. They recycle the same words, yeah? To get learners familiar with those words. In the classroom, it is recommended, Nation recommends that for the highest frequency words, for our learners to use graded readers. Yeah? Graded readers aimed at their level. Yeah? And there should be some deliberate teaching and learning. Deliberate teaching by the teacher, deliberate learning by the learners. For mid-frequency words, for learners to read, again, readers, and for them to want to learn these words. Excuse me. For the lower frequency words, it is recommended that students do a lot of wide reading. When our students go to the respective faculties, they would be exposed to a lot of text that is in the respective disciplines. So what we can say is that good learners are those who initiate their own learning and selectively attend to words of their own choice, because only you would know what words you do know and don't know. Some words have a lot higher learning burden, meaning some words are a lot more difficult to commit to memory compared to others. Good learners should studiously try to remember these words and should seek opportunities to use them. And so we, as good language teachers, should help our learners to initiate their own learning. Help learners to selectively attend, or encourage them to selectively attend to words of their own choice, to help them to studiously remember these words and to help them to seek opportunities to use them. Okay. Some pedagogical implications. Teachers should create a reading culture, reading for pleasure in class, with the teacher being the role model. We should walk the talk. I know there is not enough time for us as teachers to, it would be such a luxury for us to be able to say, let's take 10 minutes to read this graded reader. It's possibly not, we possibly do not have the time to do that. But what we could do is that assign this for students to read in their own time, and do a bit of sharing session in the class. Tell them what you have read, tell them what you liked about the book, what you didn't like about the book. Just because you read it, it doesn't mean that you liked it. And remember, repetition is key. Repetition is key. So students need to be exposed to the word after the first meeting. So this is where the graded reader is really important, because remember, graded readers are based on words that are repeated, that are recycled. And so that was why the graded reader series that we read in school, in my secondary school, was particularly useful. I think that was my input. That was my input. Nation recommends the 4-strand principle in the language classroom, where there should be equal emphasis on meaning-focused input and meaning-focused output. Where learners read just for the meaning, and they should be able to have an output that is focused on meaning, and they also should be language-focused learning, and also fluency development. So the task assigned to me in secondary school, where I was always asked to write non-stop, that was fluency development. And the graded readers was actually, meaning-focused input. I think I had very little output, but of course we had the usual exercises or the usual activities in class. But I was I'm really an introvert, so I really did not participate a lot. Did not like presenting, But these should be equally addressed in the language classroom. Remember how we learned to ride our first bicycle? How did we do it? I remember when I was little, I was then living in Alistar. I had so many scars on my knee. My late mother was really, really cross with me because I would, fall when I was trying to learn how to ride the bike. We can relate this to the way we learn how to read. However, input must be comprehensible for learning to occur. The graded reader is a much needed repetition, exposure to the words accounted. We must educate or remind our learners that language learning is an active process, that it continues throughout life. That our learning is enhanced when we use what we know in new and complex contexts. As time progresses, our sophistication increases. So we have to help them, understand. I know our learners are sometimes in a hurry, especially our learners in IIUM. A lot of them would just, wish we could give them the formula for them to quickly get on with the language learning and just join the faculty. But unfortunately, that is not so. Yeah? Learning strategy is a lifelong skill. We have to make our learners understand that an additional language is beneficial for personal development and also professional development, especially English language in today's world. Yeah? This is a soft skill that is very, very valuable. And we have to convince them that this is a skill that they should keep on improving. Yeah? And it is fluid. It will improve through time. One of the things, one of the struggles that I frequently see in my Malaysian learners is that they frequently say that we don't have the vocabulary to say the things that we want to say. Yeah? And I tell them again and again and again, you have to have input for you to have output. Today, there are a lot of resources at our fingertips. Yeah, there are many resources. The internet is filled with resources for us to use. We probably do not have time to do that, to give all resources to our learners, but we should encourage our learners to look up all these resources. And so throughout this session, we have looked at all these questions, the issues in vocabulary acquisition. We've looked at which vocabulary to focus on, the high frequency words, to master that, and then to move on to the technical vocabulary. And then we looked at the question if teachers should teach all vocabulary in class. That's not nearly possible. Yeah? But what we should try and teach is some vocabulary learning strategies. Yeah? How much vocabulary is enough? Yes, we can measure that. There are tests available, and of course, we looked at some pedagogical implications. Right, I think we've come to the end of my presentation. Inshallah, these are some of the references that I have used throughout my presentation, inshallah. I think I will stop here and would like to invite questions.
Oh, thank you very much, Datin,
I shall stop
for the insightful presentation. Yeah, all right. And for sharing your personal journey as well. Yeah, we do have questions. An active listener, I would say. Ustazah Sabaria, would you like to ask your question to the presenter, to Datin, directly?
Assalamualaikum, Datin Sabaria. She has a question, is it? Let me have a look.
Yes, yes. But probably she would like to ask herself.
Sure, sure.
Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullah.
Yes.
How are you?
Alhamdulillah, ana bi khair.
MashaAllah. I hope that there will be more, what we call more lecturers to be with you today, but because there is another session, workshop, but I prefer to be with you because you are my mentor.
MashaAllah.
Yes, and most of you in this workshop are my mentors. All right, my first question actually is about diary. Because
diary studies.
Yeah, actually I'm not good in English during my secondary school, and I can say that I'm weak lah. But once there was one teacher who taught me, encouraged me to write a diary every day. And then the thing is like this, that was good, but how could I add the vocabulary? Because I think every day will be the same vocab macam apa yang I buat. So that's how it works actually. So after that, I did not continue. tapi I could feel dia punya ada improvement lah sebab everyday I have to write and so on. So that's number one. And number two, I'm very interested to know how your teacher, you said that based on your personal journey, you know, in learning English language, and I believe that I could use that methods that your teacher taught you in my teaching in Arabic. Thank you, Datin.
Thank you, Datin Sabaria. I think remember we were talking about the 4 strands. Nation recommends the 4 strands. Yeah, the diary writing is actually a fluency exercise. It's sort of similar to the free writing exercise that my teacher used to make us do. I used to not like the activity, you know, because I would say, I don't know how to say this. But what she was trying to get us to do is to get used to using certain expressions when talking about certain things. Remember I said there were times when she said, go out, look up to the sky and tell me what you see and write about what you see. Yeah, and I would think, I don't know how to do this. Like you said, Datin Sabaria, you know, we recycle the same vocabulary. Yeah, but at least you get used to thinking in the target language. Yeah, I used to have I once had a teacher who said to me, I can't remember who said this to me exactly, but she would say, you know, you won't be proficient in the language until you start dreaming in the target language. Yeah, where it has really entered your subconscious. Susah tu nak kena sampai mimpi dalam bahasa Arab tu Saza. You know, that would take me forever. So I think that was the point of the diary studies. Yeah, for fluency exercises. You were talking about for teaching Arabic. Yeah, I do not know if there are graded readers for Arabic. But we are very fortunate because in English there are actually graded readers. These graded readers are books that have been written special for certain level students. Yeah, if you are really a beginner, there are books targeted for you. Yes. So what they have done is that they have actually limited the amount of vocabulary that a learner is exposed to. Yeah, there is a whole concept related to how you should help your learners with graded readers. If there are no graded readers, a learner has to struggle with authentic text. Yeah, that was one of my struggles when I was a language learner. I attempted to read everything. Yeah, and I discovered that most of the time I get really, really frustrated because there were a lot of unknown words to me. Yeah, because I was a learner, but because this was an authentic text with a lot of specialized vocabulary, with a lot of technical vocabularies, I didn't understand most of it, and I got very, very demotivated. So I suppose my recommendation for you as teachers of the Arabic language is for you to possibly get simple text. Before we had graded readers, I think language practitioners would use children books. Yeah, because children books are usually written with very simplified language. So that would possibly be very helpful as input for a beginner learner. Yeah, Wallahu a'lam, Hada Sabaria, my knowledge of the Arabic vocabulary and the vocabulary in Arabic is really limited. Maybe we could carry out research together and see how much there are, or maybe you could also how much there are, texts that are catered for beginner learners. Maybe you could also initiate graded readers as they have it in English. There are many endless graded readers by various publishers in English. You could possibly also do that for the Arabic language, considering the popularity now today, isn't it? People are more and more wanting to acquire the Arabic language, inshallah, because the language of the Quran is really complex, isn't it, Hajjah Sabaria? For you to, want to learn from the Quran, you would be really confined to the really word level. Yeah, and I know the grammatical system in the Arabic language is very complex as well. Yeah, Wallahu a'lam. Thank you,
Yes.
Dr. Tabari.
Yes, agree with you, Datin. My daughter said that she learned from Peter and Jane where the words are being repeated, you know.
Yes,
I mean,
yes,
yeah, I wonder whether we have the same graded text for Arabic as well, you know, like Peter and Jane, that
yes.
kind of thing. Uh,
Hmm.
okay, but probably for lower, like we have level 1 and level 2 students with
Uh-huh.
no English, no knowledge of English at all, you know. So
Mhm.
what would be the best way to teach then?
I suppose to teach them the
Probably,
very high frequency words because
that means they need to memorize that,
um,
memorization.
yes, they need to memorize. They need to commit these words to memory. Yeah. However, you commit it to your memory it depends on your learning style, isn't it?
I see. Yes,
Because
yes,
different
yes.
people have it different ways. Like my daughter
Uh-huh.
was very visual. You know, when she was trying to acquire the Arabic language, she would write the words and she would color code the words. I didn't understand what she was doing, but
I see.
she felt that that was the strategy for her.
I
Yeah.
see.
But my
I
son,
see.
being a very auditory person, no, he didn't write anything. You know, he would just prefer to listen to everything. So it really depends.
Right.
I'm also a
Right.
very visual person. I can't just you know, hear something and remember it. So it really
Yes.
depends on your learning style.
Yes. Agree. Any more questions? Do we have more questions? I do have one more.
Yes, sure. Go ahead, Dr.
I
Khairul.
also have one more, but I give to
Okay.
Dr. Khairiyah first.
No,
Okay.
go ahead. That is Sabara. Go ahead.
First, oh, mashallah, thank you very much. I
You
love you.
first.
You know, the thing why I can speak better than before because of you, because you always encourage me. Even I know there are some errors in my, I mean, in the words and so on. So thank you very much, Dr. Khairiyah. Okay, last one is about because I love to learn English language, you know, because of Serpent. Right. How far that Google Translation help us, like me, you know, imagine that I'm a slow learner to improve my English language. And just want to share, let's say my students, I mean, it's Arabic, you know, let's say that they want to translate from Malay to Arabic or English to Arabic. I always say like this. I say, okay, don't use very long sentences because they cannot give you grammar, a correct grammar. So, very short sentence. Okay, katalah your daughter Khairiyah, dia nak tulis, I love my family. So, just I love my family, not need to write more than 5 words. Sometimes the grammar habis lari. Okay, so how is it? How far that Google Translation helped me to improve my vocabulary? Thank you again, and I think that's the last from me.
Thank
And
you.
my coverage is not so good. Thank you.
Thank you. Google Translate is Google Translate is useful up to a certain extent, but there have been many instances where there are problems with Google Translate. Yeah, but you can use Google Translate, but sometimes there have been instances where I think a lot of people use Google Translate and not check that it is actually correct. So it is useful to a certain extent, but don't rely on it totally. Yeah. I would say for starters, it is useful without saying a lot more. Yeah.
For again, that means Google Translate is
useful.
yeah.
However, we all know there are instances where you know, when you rely on it totally, it can be
Yes.
you know, it can be a disaster. So yes, it is there as a tool that we can use. Yeah. But use it with caution. Yeah. Okay, Dr.
That is somebody is saying that her coverage is bad, you know.
Okay, all right.
It's okay. It's
All right.
okay. There's another one. Oops. There's another one, another question here.
From?
How a beginner in a language to be fluent with limited vocabulary? I suppose like those in level 1, level 2, for instance, they have limited vocabulary. So how would they improve their English, their proficiency?
That's the thing. We've got to have comprehensible input. Yeah, you've got to have comprehensible input, and they've got to if you are a beginner with a very limited amount of vocabulary, you've got we as teachers, language educators, have got to help them to acquire the language very, very quickly. Yeah, and so it is. I suppose it is possible for a beginner learner with very limited vocabulary to be able to express himself, to communicate effectively. But we've got to encourage them to acquire more vocabulary so that they can have more, how should I put it? They can have more words in order to express what they want to say, or to have more words in the communication. Inshallah. There's a question here. Yes.
Yeah. Probably like your experience. You mentioned that you worked. That's also one of the ways for you to improve your proficiency. Well, probably our students need to work as well.
The thing is that it's a bit different here. Yeah, one, English is not the language of the environment.
Yes.
Arabic is not a language of the environment. Yeah, so I was fortunate because I was studying in Texas, so I had no choice. I had to struggle because I had to communicate. Yeah, if I hadn't worked, I think I would have kept in my small community of Malay friends. Yeah, so I found that I started working in my second year. After 1 year, I discovered that tak boleh jadi ni. I was not improving. I was using the Malay language more often than not. So yes, if you are fortunate enough to be able to live in an environment, definitely total immersion is most helpful. Yeah, I think researchers have shown that the best way to learn a language is to go live in a country that speaks a language. The second way is to read. Yeah, to read a lot in that type of language. So, you were saying just now, I've forgotten what you wanted to your question just now.
Yeah, your advice to our students. Is it necessary for them to work in order to improve their proficiency?
Not really, but I think today we've got a lot of input. There are a lot of resources on the internet. Remember I said, one of the things I think, remember I mentioned the metacognitive strategies, is for us to highlight to our learners to say, you've got to be conscious about how you want to learn the language and what benefits you the most. Yeah, remember I said my son is very auditory. He picks up things from the things that he listens to. Listen to YouTube, look at, National Geographic videos, or, watch movies, but some of us, if we are not paying attention to movies, we're not paying attention to what is being said in the movie. Yeah, sometimes we look at expressions that people use, and then I still do that. I like to listen to people talking, especially those with an Australian accent, because I don't know the Australian accent. So I say, oh, that's how that is said, or that's how you say it. Yeah. So you've got to be conscious that you are trying to pick up language and to be alert, of the things that is going on around you. Yeah. I'd like to answer this question from Sister Aisha from YouTube.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. She said, What is your opinion on teachers using L1 in the English classes? Or to what extent is this acceptable? I suppose for the absolute beginners, L1 is helpful. Yeah, you can't help it. You know, we all know in the International Islamic University, we have absolute beginners in our classrooms. And some of them resort to using the electronic dictionary. Some of them need the help of their friends to translate. I think to a certain extent it is helpful. Yeah, but don't make it a habit to use it all the time. Especially for teachers, it is helpful for you to use it to a certain extent. Yeah, because sometimes when you use the target language all the time, learners do not understand. It's useful to use some bit of translation, but don't make a habit to use that all the time, because the target is to get the learners to practice language. Yeah. In my classroom, I don't like to use the L1. Sometimes I do code switch, just for effect purposes. But I think for higher level proficiency students, it is always best to use the target language for them to practice and listening to you talking, because you are also providing input for them. So I feel that is actually very useful for you to use the target language all the time. I hope that answers your question, Aisha. There's another question here from Adura.
Yes.
She says, how effective is it picking up vocabulary to listening to audio visual materials, particularly YouTube videos for children, without having to view words physically, and how they're spelt? I think it depends on the person. Yeah, I am a very visual person. My first exposure would have to be something that I see, and then I like to listen to it next. Yeah, but some people, they like to listen to it first. But of course, the English language is rather unique. Or it's not unique. A lot of languages like the English language, such that the sound, the spelling and the sound are not, you can't actually equate the spelling and the sound. There are a lot of irregularities in the English language. So I can't really answer that for you, Adura. But I feel that children pick up very, very easily. They're like sponges. Remember I said my eldest daughter, it was really effortless for her to pick up the English language. Yeah, and vice versa, to pick up the English language, and vice versa when she came back to Malaysia, it was also effortless for her to pick up the Malay language, because it was a language that her friends spoke in school. Yeah, it really depends. Sometimes I think children who, because we must remember, for first language, we listen to the language and we use the language without reading. Children who are very young, at the age of 2, they can speak before they can write. Yeah, so yeah, it could be effective. It would be effective, depending on your learning style and what your child is like. So I'm sorry, I'm not able to give a more definitive answer.
Well, I suppose.
Yes,
Do we have more questions?
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum.
Yes, Associate Professor Dr. Engku Haliza and Dr. Khairia. I have a few questions. The first, you did mention about the code switching. Okay, when we teach language, sometimes we need to go back to L1, yeah. Or what I want to ask, what is your opinion about using colloquial language? Because in Arabic, for example, we are teaching the modern standard language, modern standard Arabic, also called the Quranic Arabic. But in Arab countries, they are using colloquial languages. Jordanian with their Jordanian colloquial languages, Egyptian with a very different colloquial languages.
Yes.
So sometimes in classes, do we need also to introduce, because I have seen some syllabus in the States, for example, and some professors teaching Arabic in the States, in their textbooks, they do introduce colloquial Egyptian Arabic, for example, in their textbook. So what is your opinion on this? Do we need to introduce that as well? That is my first question. Yes.
Yeah. Can I answer that first?
Yes, yes, please, Doctor.
Yeah, I understand that. However, it depends on the purpose of you teaching the language. In our university, our learners learn, most of our learners, if they are going to study in Arabic medium, they have to use the language for academic purposes. So for that purposes, I think it is particularly important for you to use the formal Arabic. Yeah, because they might see it in academic text, and so academic texts tend to use a very formal variety of the language. Yeah, I use the term variety of the language. However, if you're teaching the language for communication, then possibly it would be helpful for you to introduce some sort of colloquial varieties. But there are many colloquial varieties, just like Fairuz.
Yes, yes.
Sure, with Arabic, there are many varieties. So which variety do you choose? So that's another issue there. Yeah,
yes,
so,
that's correct.
Yeah, so I think my stance on it would be, of course, just to teach the formal variety that you can understand. Text when you read academic text, when you read, especially for learners who are targeting to learn Arabic for academic purposes, inshallah. I hope that answers your question, Mr. Fairuz.
Yeah, thank you, Doctor. And another question. What is your opinion?
I hope that would be the last question.
Oh, okay, thank you very much. Okay, what is your opinion about accent? So when you acquire a language, do we need to acquire the accent of the native speakers as well?
I had a bit of an issue with that, Dr. Fairuz. When I first learned, remember I was in the US, so I really picked up my spoken English in the US. So I had a bit of an American accent. Yeah, not because I wanted to, but because I used the language for communication in the US, and I was there for 4 years. Yeah, so and then it was unfortunate that when I came back, when I went to the UK. After that, to pursue my master's and my PhD, someone in my department in the UK said, "We don't like Americans here. You sound very American." So, I was thinking like, alamak, pandai cakap orang putih pun salah, So, so I had to sort of neutralize my accent. So what I deduce from that, Ustaz Fairuz, is that it's probably good to have a neutral accent. What is the most dominant accent in Arabic, Ustaz Fairuz?
I'm not sure whether we have accent in Arabic or not, because
but you have,
sometimes we have dialects, and sometimes in terms of pronunciation of certain letters, yes, they pronounce it differently. For example, in what we learned for the letter G, we produce the J sound, but in Egypt they produce the G sound. Yes. So so sometimes they even use different letters to convey the same sound. So yes.
Would the standard dialect be comprehensible to a majority of the people, to a majority of Arabic speakers around the world?
When you say the standard standard dialect, is it the standard Arabic?
Yes.
Okay. For the standard Arabic, for the normal person, for the ordinary people, sometimes they will say like, what is because even in Arab countries, yes, where are you from? Because even for the Arab themselves, I've read that they face this dualism even in their home, because at home they use their colloquial language, and then when they go to school, yes, they learn the modern standard Arabic. And yes, I've seen a few teachers teaching Arabic at school. They have to resort to their colloquial language as well to explain the modern standard Arabic.
Right. I would recommend in an academic setting to always go for the standard. Yeah, to always go for the standard, mainly because the texts that we are exposed to are all using standard variety, and when you write for academic purposes, you are required to use standard vocabulary, isn't it? Just for that. But I think when learners get to be more proficient, it would be useful for them to acquire a dialect depending on where they are. Like when I was in Texas, I had to sort of fit in and not sound very different from the people there. So, but I couldn't acquire the text and dialect, which was very, very difficult. Yeah. So yeah, I think my recommendation is always to go for the standard. Yeah. I think in most cases, the standard dialect would be comprehensible across most varieties. Inshallah. Wallahu alam.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Khairus. We have another question from Sister Asha. Would you like to answer that, or?
Yes, one last one. Yeah, inshallah.
Okay, one last question. Yes, from Sister Asha.
Yes. How can we as teachers improve our vocabulary? That's the question. That's a question I ask myself all the time. I think as teachers, we have to, or rather as individuals who do not speak the language as our native language, we have to be conscious of the fact that language is fluid. Yeah, and input is very important. It is very, very important. For me, myself, I think I find the language very intriguing. You know, I like to listen to newscasters reading the news, like BBC, when they use RP, received pronunciation. You know, there was one time I was listening to this recording on YouTube, and you know, my mouth was really open. You know, I was when my husband came to me and said, because I was listening to this lady using RP, received pronunciation. You know, and to me, it is very interesting for me to learn to want to pronounce or to enunciate like the British. So I think what we as teachers have to do is that you have to have a lot of input. Yeah, it depends on what you like as input. I enjoy reading, but I discovered that I enjoy reading fiction. I enjoy reading for pleasure, but to me today, that's such a luxury. I do not have the time to read for pleasure that much. Yeah, but I tend to reward myself with you know, with reading something that I enjoy. So definitely we have to have input. How would you have output when you don't have input? Yeah, it's the same for learners. My students would frequently complain, Madam, I do not have enough vocabulary. So I say to them, how do you, the way to have enough vocabulary is for you to have input. It doesn't come from the sky. Yeah, you've got to have a lot of input. The input can come in the form of you know, things that you listen to, resources on the internet. Those of us who enjoy reading, we can read a lot. But I think as teachers, it is very important for us to read frequently. Yeah, that is because remember, my teacher said, you've got to dream in the language, in the target language. Then you know that it has entered your subconscious. So we've got to reach that level. Yeah. Yes. So I think that's my recommendation. Wallahu alam. Different people may have different styles of enriching their vocabulary. At our point, we've got to. We are really at the point of enrichment. Yeah, and getting to the level of sophistication where our vocabulary gets to be more sophisticated, and our use of the language also gets to be more sophisticated. Allahu alam. I hope I answer your question, Sister Aisha. But then, of course, I think. My last words is that we never stop learning, isn't it? We will learn the whole of our lives. And what's important is for us to keep reminding ourselves that we should keep on learning. Yeah, just as we are, you know, as we go to the classroom and teach our learners, with that we keep on learning. We learn new things every day. I learn new things every day with every class, even though I teach lower level students. I learn a lot of new things every day.
Okay, with that, thank you very much, Dr. Nku. Thank you very much, Sister Asha, and all the others who have asked questions, as well as those who participated in this webinar. I suppose you have to be more on webinar then. Yeah, Dr. Nku. It seems like there should be another session with you then.
Okay, inshallah. Last words, yeah, Dr. Khairia.
Yes.
Thank you for being with us in this SAPAT Research Unit webinar series. Inshallah, just to whet your appetite a little bit, join us next time with our next session of the webinar. Inshallah, we'll have Assistant Professor Dr. Khairia, who will be addressing us with a very interesting area on Islamization in language teaching. Yeah, Dr. Khairia?
No.
For the announcement, and we will certainly send out the announcement. And over to you, Dr. Khairia.
Okay, I think the coordinator is taking the opportunity to announce for the next webinar, it seems. Okay, now with that, we end the session. Thank you very much again, Datin, Dr. Nku, for sharing your experience, for your knowledge. We end the session with Tasbih Kafarah and Surah Al-Astan. Yes? And don't forget to sign your attendance, yeah? Those who have joined the webinar. Okay, thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah.
Waalaikumsalam.
Please.
Have we stopped recording, Raja Munira?
Not yet, Datin. Let me stop it now.